My name is Elena Walsh, 35 years old, living in Denver, Colorado, where winter mornings get so cold you have to take a deep breath just to remember you're still alive. I work in tech, specializing in artificial intelligence and machine learning. My job is to build systems that predict human behavior. I teach computers how to understand you, how you shop, how you choose, how you think. And those very models have made my company tens of millions of dollars. I work for Brightway Technologies, a data analytics firm focused on behavioral prediction. You might not know their name, but chances are you've already been tracked by their system, or rather, by mine. Every time you see an ad pop up for something you were just thinking about, it's probably one of my algorithms at work. I joined Brightway 10 years ago, back when it was a 30-person startup. At the time, CEO Mason Rourke was my idol, smart, confident, and sharp with his words. I still remember the first time he shook my hand and said, "This industry needs more women who think like you." I believed he meant it, and for years, I worked day and night to prove him right. And I did. In the past 3 years, the consumer behavior prediction system I developed became Brightway's backbone. The project, Project Horizon, as Mason loved to call it at press conferences, now accounts for over 40% of the company's total revenue. It's the reason Brightway went from a mid-sized business to the new star of America's data industry. 40% of revenue, a massive number, not just on paper, but in every contract I helped close. Every line of code I tested and optimized. I was the analyst, the architect, the tester, the optimizer. But on every public document, the credit line always reads, "Under the leadership of CEO Mason Rourke, Brightway achieved a major breakthrough in AI." My name never appeared, not once. In leadership meetings, Mason liked to say, "We have an amazing AI team." Team. But in reality, that team was just me, and occasionally an intern entering data by hand. I was never hungry for power. I didn't need my name on the front page. I just wanted acknowledgement. Once would have been enough. But it never came. I had the chance to leave. 3 years ago, a former colleague at Google reached out. "Elena, we're building a new AI recommendation team. You'd be perfect for it. The pay's at least double." I looked at her email, then at the system I was still building at Brightway. I'd poured sweat, tears, and thousands of late nights into it. I thought, if I stay, if I'm loyal, they'll see me. I told her. "I believe loyalty gets rewarded." She paused. "Elena, I hope you're right." 3 years later, I was still at Brightway. Same desk, same chair. No new title, no real raise. But I didn't complain. I'd been taught that hard work is its own reward. I live with my mother, Evelyn, 62, a retired court clerk. She's now in a wheelchair because of type 2 diabetes complications. Every month, her medications and therapy cost nearly $2,000. I cover all of it. My younger brother Josh is in college in California, studying journalism. I pay his tuition, his rent, and his living expenses, all of it, alone. I never told anyone. I didn't want my coworkers to think I was whining. I wasn't. I was just tired. Tired of trying so hard to be seen and still being invisible. Sometimes Mason would walk by my desk, pat the back of my chair, and say, "Good work, Elena. Keep it up." Then he'd walk away, not even remembering which project I was on. I don't know how many people he's said that to, but every time I'd smile and reply, "Thanks, Mason." Then keep working. Everything changed because of one invoice, a single sheet of paper that made me realize 10 years of loyalty meant nothing. It was my mother's new medical bill, $1,480 a month, not covered by insurance. I opened my bank account. After rent, utilities, and my brother's tuition, I had just over 2,000 left. I stared at that number, then at my screen, the predictive revenue model I'd just completed, which had saved the company $5 million in marketing costs in 1 quarter. 5 million for them, 2,000 for me. I laughed, not out of sadness, but at how naive I'd been. I didn't need a thank you. I needed fair pay. That night, after helping my mother to bed, I brewed tea and opened my personal laptop. I went into the personal projects folder, where I kept my off hours ideas, ad efficiency predictors, data distribution optimizers, all time stamped, neatly documented. I reread my own notes. Some of what Brightway was using had never been formally transferred to the company. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew this much. Anything I created on my own time, with my own equipment, was mine. I took a deep breath, opened a blank document, and typed the first line: Salary Adjustment Proposal, Elena Walsh. Below it, I wrote, I've generated over 40% of Brightway's total revenue in the past 3 years. A 10% raise is a reasonable reflection of the value I bring. I stared at the words for a long moment. They were simple, logical, polite, and completely true. But deep down, I knew I had just opened a new chapter of my life. I sent the salary proposal email at 7:58 in the morning. The subject line was clear and simple: Salary Adjustment Request, Elena Walsh. I attached a 42-page document detailing every project I'd led over the past 3 years: model performance reports, revenue generated, client cost savings, and positive feedback from both sales teams and customers. I did it like a scientist, with data, evidence, and no emotion. I had no illusions in my head. I wasn't expecting a thank you, fireworks, or a celebration. All I wanted was fairness, or at least a respectful conversation. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday afternoon in the executive conference room on the 7th floor. Attending were Mason, the CEO, Judith from HR, and me. I arrived 5 minutes early. The glass walls of the room looked out over the sunlit city. I stood by the long table, holding a printed copy of my report. Mason came in last, in his usual fashion, smiling, patting my shoulder as if this were some friendly catch-up. Well, Elena, what do we have here? He said, sitting down and opening his laptop like it was just another routine meeting. I kept my tone steady. I'd like to discuss my salary adjustment proposal. I sent all the relevant details in the email. I handed him the printed report. Mason flipped through the first few pages, nodding, eyes still on his screen. Impressive. You've really done great work. Then he looked up, smiled, and suddenly laughed. But 10%? You want a 10% raise after what, 10 years? 12? The laughter echoed against the glass walls like a cold, sharp blade. I stood still, gripping the folder as if holding on to my last bit of dignity. Judith gave a nervous smile, clearly uncomfortable but saying nothing. Mason continued, Elena, you know I value you. You're talented. But you're a back office function, not a direct value creator. The board doesn't care who writes the code. They want to see who closes deals, who's in the spotlight representing the company. I swallowed hard. I think 40% of total revenue coming from the system I built qualifies as direct value. Mason tilted his head, still smiling. Don't take it personally, Elena. This is business. And in business, everyone is replaceable. Each word hit like concrete against my chest. It wasn't just a rejection. It was erasure. Not a, we'll revisit next quarter. Not a, budget's tight right now. It was, you don't matter. I stayed still, forcing my voice not to shake. I understand, I said, though I didn't. I gathered my papers, the pages trembling slightly in my hands. Mason's tone softened, as if to make up for it. Don't be upset. I know you're good, but honestly, the board doesn't even know who you are. If you think you're worth more, maybe you should try your luck somewhere else. I nodded, thanked him, and walked out. I can't even remember if I took the stairs or the elevator. All I remember is sitting back at my desk, staring at my cold coffee and the new email on my screen. Brightway's AI system named one of top 10 in the US. And right below it, a caption. Congratulations to our visionary CEO, Mason Rourke. I stared at that line for a long time. Visionary CEO. The man who never wrote a single line of code. The man who couldn't tell supervised learning from reinforcement learning without his assistant whispering in his ear. The man who laughed at me for asking for a raise, smaller than what he spends on a single dinner meeting. I opened my drawer and pulled out the brown leather notebook where I'd written down all my personal projects. Product recommendation models developed after work hours, Ad targeting algorithms are improving behavioral accuracy. Automated A/B testing analysis. Every entry was dated, labeled clearly, developed outside company hours, on personal laptop, no company resources used. I flipped to a page marked in red ink. Project ARC, context driven deep learning framework for user behavior. I'd written it 3 years ago. It was also the foundation of the current system Brightway was using. And right then, between faded lines of ink, I didn't just see an algorithm. I saw time I'd sacrificed, nights I stayed awake while my mother coughed in the next room, weekends I skipped seeing friends to perfect another version. And I understood, with painful clarity, that I'd wasted faith on someone who never intended to see me. It wasn't that my heart broke. No. Something deeper cracked, a core belief that if I stayed quiet, worked hard, and stayed humble, the world would treat me fairly. I closed the notebook, and in that moment, what came wasn't anger or despair, it was clarity. I couldn't expect others to value me if I didn't start acting like I had value myself. That night, I didn't go home right away. I went to a small coffee shop downtown, sat in my usual corner, opened my personal laptop, and logged into my email. I searched for an old message from 6 months ago. Elena, if you're ever ready, Helix Core will always have a place for you. It was from Ava Chen, CTO of a fast growing startup. I looked at the words, then typed my reply. Ava, I think it's time we have a serious conversation. I got home a little after 9 that night, later than usual. My mother was already asleep. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that matched exactly how my mind felt. No anger, no resentment, just a cold, steady clarity. I couldn't tell her what had happened. She would have told me to be patient, to endure, that everyone gets recognized eventually as long as they don't give up. That's her generation, built on faith. Faith in the company, in the boss, in the system. I didn't blame her, but I knew one thing for sure: faith doesn't pay for medication. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my personal laptop. The screen lit up with a familiar line of text. Last modified, Project ARC, 11:34 p.m., Tuesday. I opened the folder that held my code, models I'd built, refined, and trained with self-generated data. No company servers, no company resources, just me, this machine, and thousands of unpaid hours. Everything was organized. Every file is labeled with time, date, and the device I'd used. I even had a separate document called Not Transferred to Brightway IP, listing everything that had never been submitted to the company. I hadn't done that because I planned to use it someday. I did it because I'm meticulous. And maybe, deep down, I'd always known there would come a day when I'd need to prove that what I built belonged to me. I reopened an old email from 2021, the one I'd sent Mason. I have several AI models I'm developing off hours. If the company finds them valuable, I'm open to negotiating ownership transfer. His reply was short. If it's useful, go ahead and use it. Those things aren't that important. We'll sort it out later. I remember how disappointed I felt reading that line, but I kept working, kept believing that if I showed the value, he'd understand. Now I understand. He'd known the value all along. He just never planned to pay for something he could take for free. I opened another folder, Opportunities. Inside was a string of emails from Ava Chen, CTO of Helix Core. She used to be a technical client on a project I'd supported remotely. After leaving her firm, she joined Helix Core, a fast-growing startup specializing in e-commerce personalization. Ava had sent me 3 offers over the years. The last one was 6 months ago. Elena, you're the only person who made our model see customers as human beings, not just data points. If you ever want to work somewhere your name actually matters, call me. I clicked reply and started typing. Ava, I think it's time we have a serious conversation. Send. I exhaled. No trembling, no regret, just the strange calm of finally loosening a rope that had been tightening around my chest for 10 years. The next morning, her reply came almost instantly. I've been waiting for this email for 3 years. You free at lunch? We met at a small Japanese restaurant downtown. Ava was always direct, never one for small talk. After a few, Updates, she said. Helix Core needs a head of AI, someone who can design the strategy and build the system from the ground up. Do you want to create something that truly has your name on it? I looked at her. I don't have a team. You will. You'll choose them. You'll name the system. You'll be the face of it. I sat in silence for a long moment. In my mind, I saw the glass walls of the seventh floor conference room, Mason's laugh, his cold words echoing, "Everyone is replaceable." I looked back at Ava. "Do you have clear IP ownership terms?" She smiled. "I've had my work stolen before. We do things right here. Whatever you create, it's yours." I nodded. 3 days later, I officially submitted my resignation at Brightway. No drama, no angry letter, just one simple email. "I'm resigning effective the 15th. I'll complete all handovers. Thank you for the opportunities over the past 10 years. The reply came 12 minutes later from Mason. 2 weeks is fine. Best of luck." No questions, no hesitation. He didn't even ask why the person responsible for 40% of the company's revenue was leaving. I understood. In his eyes, I'd never really existed. I spent the following week training my replacement, a young engineer, bright but nervous about taking over the company's central AI system. I didn't tell him why I was leaving. I just said, "You'll do better than me if you learn to value yourself early." He smiled, shy and uncertain, and nodded. On my last night at Brightway, I cleared my desk. I took down the photo of my mother and brother, my white porcelain coffee cup, and the brown leather notebook that had followed me for a decade. I opened it to the first page, my handwriting from years ago. "No one sees you? That's okay. Just do good work. One day, someone will notice." I picked up my pen and added one more line. "That someone has to be you first." When I walked out of the Brightway building for the last time, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I was taking everything that truly belonged to me. 3 days after leaving Brightway, I sat in my new office, a small corner on the third floor of Helix Core's headquarters. No tall glass walls overlooking the city. No massive conference table. No leather chairs that whispered status. Just a plain desk, a whiteboard, and a team of 4 people waiting for me to lead them. I'd never had people reporting to me before. At Brightway, I was the fixer, not the one people listened to. But here, in a room without a nameplate on the door, I was the head of AI, and everyone was looking at me. "Where do you want to start?" asked Liam, a young engineer with bright eyes. I smiled, opened my laptop, and launched the demo of an old project titled ARC, Personalized Decision Framework. "Let's start here," I said, with what was once overlooked. ARC was a deep learning model I'd spent 3 years building, but never got to deploy at Brightway. Partly because it exceeded their data infrastructure, but mostly because it wasn't Mason's idea. I explained to the team how ARC would work. It didn't just analyze user behavior, it predicted intent in context, using a network that tracked micro-behaviors, the subtle actions people make without realizing. Instead of simply suggesting products, ARC understood how a user felt, where they were in their journey, and responded in ways that fit their emotional state, not just corporate profit. Liam's eyes widened. "It's like reading their minds." "Not reading," I corrected. "Understanding. And understanding to serve, not manipulate." That was the biggest difference between me and Brightway. I never wanted to build a machine that coerced people into buying. I wanted technology that respected them as human beings. Ava, the CTO, stepped in mid-meeting. "Everything okay here?" "I need full access to user data from our 3 pilot clients, yeah," I said. She nodded without hesitation. "You have it." I wasn't used to that, to not being second-guessed, to not spending months defending an idea. At Brightway, it took me 4 months to get approval for a single test model. At Helix Core, it took 4 minutes. 3 weeks later, the first version of ARC went live on a test server for Helix Core's biggest e-commerce client. The results after 10 days stunned everyone. Conversion rates are up 28%. User return rates up 46%. Average engagement time doubled. The board called it an unscheduled leap. I called it what it really was: the product of creative freedom. For the first time in my life, I wrote an internal report where the first line read, Lead developer, Elena Walsh, not AI team, not technical collaboration, just me. When I submitted it, Ava placed a hand on my shoulder. I want you to present these results at next week's investor meeting. You, not me. I hesitated. I'm not good at presentations, she smiled. The world's ignored your voice long enough. It's time. It listened. That day, I didn't wear a blazer. I wore a gray sweater my mother had knitted last winter. I didn't speak like an executive. I spoke like an engineer. Here's what the system saw. Here's why it understood people. And here's why that matters. One of the investors, an older man with silver hair who had backed Brightway 6 years ago, nodded through the entire presentation. At the end, he said quietly, We used to think AI only needed accuracy. Today, I learned it needs empathy too. That night, Helix Core secured an additional $1.2 million in extended funding. Ava texted me one line. You just gave us 18 more months of runway. I stared at the message, sitting in my new apartment, smaller, farther from downtown, but mine. No sound of a boss's footsteps passing my desk. No midnight emails asking, Elena, are you still handling that? Just me. And the feeling of finally living at my own worth. I opened my brown leather notebook, flipped to a blank page, and wrote, Arc has taken flight. I knew this was only the beginning, but I also knew, this time, I wasn't walking in the dark anymore. Success came to Helix Core faster than I expected. And as I knew all too well, that's never good news for everyone. Less than 2 weeks after the investor presentation, Ava called me at 7 in the morning. Unusual, since she's the kind of person who starts her day with coffee and yoga, not crisis calls. Elena, are you sitting down? Her voice was tight. I am. What happened? Unified Media Group is pausing the contract. I froze. Unified was Helix Core's biggest pending client, a $4 million ARC deployment. We'd passed every trial phase. All that was left was a signature. Why? They said they've gotten signals from the market that our technology might involve unclear intellectual property. I didn't need her to say the name, Mason Rourke. I could picture him in his top-floor office at Brightway reading the industry brief about Helix Core, seeing my photo in the investor report and realizing he'd let a diamond slip through his fingers because he thought it was just a stone. Mason was not the kind of man who watched a rival company rise on what he once considered his asset. Legally, he never owned me, but in his mind, I was company property, a back-office function, as he'd once said. And now I was on the cover of a competitor's investment portfolio. He wouldn't let that go. Ava sent me an audio file, a recording of Unified's call with their in-house counsel. My name came up. Elena Walsh, former Brightway employee, now head of AI at Helix Core, believed to have developed a system similar to Project Horizon, proprietary technology of Brightway Technologies. I gripped the phone tighter. The lawyer's tone wasn't aggressive, not even directly accusatory, but heavy with implication. We just want to ensure there are no legal risks. Mr. Rourke takes intellectual property very seriously. I knew this tactic. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was manipulation through suspicion. A well-timed whisper that made any partner hesitate, especially when marketing budgets were tight and no one wanted to touch potential legal trouble. I took a slow breath. Ava, I'll handle it. I opened my laptop and pulled every file I'd ever documented, from notebooks to personal drives. Every line of code, every technical note, every timestamp I'd logged out of habit now became a legal shield. I wrote a 27-page report and sent it to Helix Core's legal team and Unified Media Group. Detailed development timelines for each algorithm. Device logs showing none belong to Brightway. The 2021 email from Mason. Go ahead and use it. Not that important. Proof that I'd once offered to negotiate IP transfer and been ignored. Attached was my formal statement. I, Elena Walsh, confirm that all systems deployed at Helix Core are based on frameworks, personally developed outside my previous employment hours, using my own equipment, and have never been transferred licensed to Brightway Technologies under any legal process. One day later, Unified replied, "Thank you for the clarification. We've reviewed the documentation and see no significant legal risk. The contract will proceed as planned." I exhaled in relief, but I knew Mason wasn't done. 4 days later, TechPulse published an article. Former Brightway employee suspected of using technology with unclear ownership at a rival firm. No name, no company. But everyone in the industry knew who it meant. Ava came straight into my office. "Do you want us to issue a media rebuttal?" I looked at her. "No. If we respond, we're playing his game. What he wants is to drag us into a narrative war. I want to win through performance." I pulled up the ARC performance report after 30 days in operation. Revenue up 31%. Cart abandonment is down nearly 50. Marketing costs down 18. "This is my voice," I said. Ava smiled. "He can't beat that." But I knew this wasn't about winning or losing. Mason was playing a different game, not to reclaim me, to stain the name I'd just built. That night, when I got home, an unexpected email waited in my inbox. Alex Romero, senior engineer at Brightway, a colleague I'd worked with for years. "Elena, what's going on? The company's quietly reviewing old AI models. They're nervous about IP exposure. People are talking. It looks like they might try to make you the issue so they can clean their slate." I replied simply, "Thanks for letting me know. I'm not the issue. I'm the person who built the solution they never paid for." I shut the laptop, and a single thought surfaced, sharp and steady. If he's trying to corner me, he's chosen the wrong person. I'm not the Elena who stayed silent and hoped to be seen. I'm the one who knows exactly what she's worth. And this time, no one gets to blur that again. I used to think that if I ever had to face Mason Rourke, I'd take him to court. I used to imagine myself in a courtroom, laying out evidence line by line, email by email, algorithm by algorithm. I would win. Justice would speak. But when reality arrived, when the media started hinting, when silent networks began tightening around the reputation I'd just built, I realized something. Winning a lawsuit doesn't mean winning the war. Mason didn't need to prove I was wrong. He just needed to plant enough doubt so that others stopped believing I was right. And I knew exactly what to do. I sent an email to Ava and the Helix Core board. Subject line: Open Community Strategy, Urgent Proposal. In the message, I wrote, "If we stay defensive, we lose the narrative Mason is manipulating. But if we open up, be transparent, invite the community to collaborate on our AI framework, we make every accusation irrelevant. No one can claim ownership over technology built, tested, and verified by hundreds of people in public." 3 days later, Helix Core announced the ARC AI Open Initiative, an open community version of ARC that allowed engineers and researchers to contribute, suggest improvements, and verify both the integrity and legality of the core algorithms. The GitHub page read, "This system was developed independently without using any resources belonging to the former employer. All contributions are publicly credited. Transparency is the foundation of AI's future." The morning it went live, the response hit like a tidal wave. Engineers from Seattle, New York, and San Francisco began downloading the code. Security analysts confirmed there were zero overlaps with Brightway's systems. A professor from MIT wrote, "I've never seen a startup open its commercial algorithm to prove its ethics. This sets a precedent." Across social media, the hashtag #ArcTransparency spread fast. A former Brightway developer messaged me privately, "Elena, I used to think you were just a great engineer. Now I see you're a real leader." That night, I received another email from Alex Romero, my old colleague who'd warned me before. "Mason lost it today. Emergency meeting, 2 hours long. He yelled, 'She's trying to lure our people away with fake generosity.' Some applauded, some stayed silent. Then they left. I think he's losing them." I read it, placed my hands on the table, and took a slow breath. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt release. After years of being unseen, I finally didn't need to prove anything. The next day, I met with Ava and the COO. "There's one more thing I want to do," I said. "I want to invite some of the old engineers from Brightway, the ones who were treated like background noise, like I was." The COO looked surprised. "You want to recruit from a competitor?" "I don't want revenge. I want to build a place where good people don't have to beg to be seen." I paused. "And I know they can help us grow faster than anyone." Ava nodded. "Do you have anyone in mind?" I picked up a marker and wrote 3 names on the whiteboard. Alex Romero, infrastructure lead. Cynthia Ho, model testing specialist, the one who spent years doing overnight runs with me. Dev Patel, DevOps expert, brilliant but never promoted under Mason. Ava read the names and said, "Send the invites. If they say no, at least they'll know there's a place ready to see them." 3 days later, I sat in a familiar coffee shop across from Alex. He stayed quiet after I gave my offer. "Elena," he said, "I'm not upset, but I have to ask. This, is it revenge or recruitment?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Alex, if I wanted revenge, I've already had it, with success. What I want now is different. I want to build a place where people like us don't need permission to matter." He nodded slowly. "Then you've got a DevOps engineer starting today." I smiled. "I thought you were infrastructure." "I've been misplaced for 5 years. You tell me what needs doing, I'll do it." 2 weeks later, Arc's upgraded version launched across all Helix Core clients. Response time dropped by 40%. User satisfaction hit a record high. Quarterly revenue jumped 31%, the highest since the company was founded. When the report reached the investor board, I was asked to present again. But this time, I didn't go alone. I brought my team: Alex, Cynthia, Dev, and 2 new hires from Brightway. I said, "This technology wasn't built by a genius. It was built by people who were once overlooked." And I ended with, "This isn't revenge. It's redefining what recognition truly means." Under the nightlights of the Helix Core office, I looked through the glass at Denver's streets glowing below. What I felt wasn't victory, it was a calm determination, the kind that comes when you know you did the right thing. Brightway was starting to unravel. The board called emergency meetings. Several major clients who had once signed long-term deals with them, after seeing Arc outperform every benchmark, began pulling out of extensions, delaying renewals. One retail conglomerate, once Brightway's flagship account, sent a letter to its board demanding a review of whether its AI partner was still a sound choice. The shadow of intellectual property risk that Mason had cast was now haunting his own company. As the first sounds of collapse echoed, Mason began to crack. I received an internal memo from an old contact at Brightway. "The board is holding a special session this Friday. There's talk of replacing the CEO if revenue keeps falling." I didn't feel joy. I didn't want to see anyone destroyed, but I knew this much. If everything he'd built was so fragile that it couldn't stand without suppressing others, then its fall was inevitable. A week later, during a public investor briefing, Mason was asked to explain the company's revenue drop. He stepped up to the podium, voice low, trying to hold composure. He said, "The market is shifting. Younger firms like Helix Core have more flexibility." I could almost see it in his eyes. He wasn't looking at the audience. He was looking at me. And behind that look, there was fear. Inside Brightway's AI division, people were leaving. Others stayed silent. Alex told me several senior engineers, people I'd once worked beside, were preparing their resignations. They didn't want their names tied to what the industry was now calling the old company. One Wednesday afternoon, I received an email from a former senior manager at Brightway, the man who had originally hired me. He wrote, "Elena, things are messy here. If you're open to it, we could talk about future collaboration, as a consultant or a partner." I set my phone down slowly. I didn't reply. I didn't need him anymore. I needed to keep building, not look back. Brightway's mistakes were spilling into the open: unqualified leadership, random cost cutting, no investment in research. Few clients wanted new contracts when they could look at Helix Core and see Arc's actual numbers: Not marketing slogans, but proven results. Tech reports began calling it Brightway's AI downturn week. Their once praised system was now rumored to be stagnating. Mason could no longer control the story. Analysts dissected Brightway's code structure, comparing it line by line with ARC, neural modules, data preprocessing, and exception handling. The very details I used to call the subtle marks of careful work were now being used to expose the difference. The board grew restless. They wanted leadership grounded. In reality, someone who didn't just talk about AI, but made it deliver. Mason proposed a major restructuring, cutting R&D to focus on sales. But it was like patching a torn suit with tape. Meanwhile, Helix Core kept moving forward, releasing ARC updates, emotion sensitivity features, and ethical data modules. None of it came from Brightway's systems. It came from the open community we'd built. The engineers I'd invited from Brightway contributed too, under their own names, not as former Brightway anything. One night, Ava called me. One of the people we brought over, Cynthia, just got an offer to return to her old company, higher title, better pay. I listened quietly. Tell her this, I said. If she wants to go back for a title and a paycheck, let her. But if she wants to stay for recognition, she belongs here. Ava laughed softly. She chose to stay. That was the first time in months I truly breathed easy. Brightway's stock kept falling. Rumors spread of lost partnerships, internal chaos, and waves of resignations. Mason was criticized in industry press for mismanaging talent, for treating his back office employees like they didn't matter. Then one day, Mason asked to meet me, not in a boardroom, but in the same small cafe where I'd spent so many nights rebuilding myself. He sat across from me, cheeks drawn, voice rough. You know, he said, I could bring you back. Senior advisory role, shares, benefits. I looked him straight in the eyes. My voice was steady. I don't want to go back. Because when I was there, my name was invisible. Here, I have my name and the freedom to build. He said nothing. His silence was heavy. Mr. Rourke, I added, you once told me everyone is replaceable, but maybe it's how you treat people that makes you the one replaced. I stood, nodded politely, and left. I knew he had nothing left to bargain with. Outside, the night air was cold. The Denver wind cut through my coat, but I didn't feel it. I felt empty in the best possible way, not bitter, not broken, just free. Brightway was collapsing from within. The machinery was breaking apart, the people were leaving, and belief itself was walking out of those glass towers. And me, I was rebuilding. From zero. For myself, and for everyone who'd ever believed in me. 3 days after that awkward encounter in the parking lot, Mason called me. This time, his tone wasn't clipped or commanding. It was lower, almost apologetic. Elena, he said, I know you have no reason to listen to me, but if there's any part of you that still believes in responsibility, meet me once. Formally, in the office, no pretense. I don't want to talk about Helix Core or ARC. I want to talk about the people left behind. I agreed, not out of curiosity or pity, but because I needed to know whether the man who once laughed at me in front of an entire boardroom still had anything left worth saving from the wreckage he'd made. The meeting took place on Thursday afternoon in a temporary office Brightway had rented, after shutting down its headquarters for financial restructuring. The room had none of the grandeur of his old office, just a wooden table, 2 chairs, and an aging projector. Mason stood when I walked in, but didn't extend his hand. I don't know if you'd even want a handshake anymore, he said. I sat down quietly. Go ahead. He drew in a deep breath before speaking. After you left, I tried to save the company the only way I knew how. Cuts, restructuring, new leadership. But I forgot that what keeps a company alive isn't structure, it's people. He paused, looking at me. The ones who left because of you. They didn't go for money or benefits. They went because for the first time someone actually saw them. I said nothing, keeping my eyes steady. Last week, he went on, one of our engineers, 9 years with Brightway, resigned. In her letter, she wrote, I can't work for a place that treats creativity as property and people as disposable. I cried. Not because I lost an employee, but because, for the first time, I understood what I'd done. He stopped, then spoke faster, like he didn't trust himself to hesitate. I'm not here to apologize. I'm here to ask for something I don't deserve unless I admit every mistake I made. He took out an envelope and set it on the table. This is a list of 42 employees laid off in the latest downsizing. All of them once worked with you. None of them did anything wrong. They were just caught in a broken system. I don't have the means to keep them, but I can't let them disappear into silence the way you once did. I opened the envelope slowly. The list was neatly printed: names, positions, skills. Attached was a proposal for collaboration between Brightway and Helix Corps, funding for retraining, staff transition support, and public acknowledgement of contributions if they were hired. I looked up at him. You think this makes it right? No, he said. I know it doesn't. I just don't want to keep being wrong. If they have a second chance, I want it to come from somewhere that values them. I glanced at the list. Cynthia's name was third, a colleague who had stood beside me for years. One condition, I said. Name it. I want every one of their names credited publicly in any product that uses their work. No company logos, no anonymity, real names, real contributions. Mason nodded. I agree, and I'll sign it, publicly. We sat in silence for a moment, not as rivals, but as two people who finally understood that neither of us wanted to keep feeding the same cycle of loss. Before I left, he said one last thing. Elena, thank you for not taking revenge. If you had, I wouldn't be standing here today. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to see him to know. For the first time, Mason Rourke wasn't speaking to win. He was speaking to lose, the right way. That night, when the lights in the Helix Corps office were off except for the dim glow of the hallway, I stayed at my desk, watching the ARC dashboard still running on the screen. I thought of the sleepless nights at Brightway, the pen that had run out of ink in my brown leather notebook, the countless times I'd walked out of a meeting with a heavy heart. A year had passed since I walked out of Mason's glass tower, since that day in the cafe when he asked for collaboration, since Helix Corps opened ARC's code to the world. And now, I stood exactly where I once dreamed of being at 25. Not someone who wanted to be seen, but someone who could no longer be replaced in her own eyes. Today, at Denver's biggest tech event, Summit AI Future, I was invited to speak on stage. The setup was grand, the auditorium full. CEOs, engineers, investors, students. The lights were blinding and the mic buzzed as they tested the sound. It wasn't pressure, it was purpose. As I stepped up, my heart trembled slightly. I looked out at the sea of faces, curious, eager, some who had followed my story since that viral video titled "My Boss Laughed." I took a deep breath and smiled. I want to tell you a story, not about a genius breakthrough, but about someone who was once ignored. I told them about my early years at Brightway, how I built the ARC algorithm, working nights while my mother was in the hospital, paying my brother's tuition, sending an email to transfer IP rights that was never answered. I told them how Mason laughed when I asked for a raise, how I packed my desk the day I resigned, and how I walked into Helix Corps with nothing but a will that refused to bend. When I spoke of ARC's open source release, I saw the audience leaning in. I talked about the engineers from Brightway I'd invited, not for revenge, but because they deserved to be heard, to contribute, to be recognized. I told them about meeting Mason again, where I turned down his offer to return, but accepted a humane partnership, a transition program for laid-off employees with their names credited in full. I spoke of Brightway's collapse, how it lost clients, lost talent, and how Helix Corps rose through transparency, ethics, and engineering excellence. Then I paused, drew a long breath, and said, what I want to emphasize today isn't Helix Corps' victory, it's this. Your worth isn't decided by others. They might not see you, they might dismiss you, they might laugh when you ask for a small share of what you built. But if you know your value, if you document your work, protect your voice, and choose to build instead of retaliate, you stop being replaceable. The room fell silent. Then the applause came, long, echoing. I looked at the screen behind me, the ARC logo glowing bright, and felt something rare, not pride, not relief, but conviction. After the talk, people lined up to shake my hand, students, women in AI, professionals who had followed the story online. Your story gave me hope. Thank you for showing us how not to be replaced. I won't stay silent anymore. Among them was Cynthia, standing just behind the crowd. She smiled. I'm proud to stand beside you. I squeezed her hand gently. The story we'd built together wasn't about revenge. It was worth about. A few days later, Helix Core released new quarterly data. Revenue up 38%, client base doubled, partnership renewals at record highs. ARC had become the top personalization AI platform in the industry. Several former Brightway clients sent collaboration requests, not to the old Elena, but to the name that now stood on its own, Elena Walsh, creator of ARC. Months later, Brightway officially announced Mason Rourke's resignation following a board decision. The company entered a new restructuring phase, searching for leadership that valued people as much as numbers. One morning, I walked into Helix Core's new headquarters, a taller glass building than before. In the main lobby hung the ARC logo. I asked for one addition, a wall of the development team, with every name listed equally, mine among them. The same names once invisible at Brightway now stood level with the leaders. When I reached my office, looking out at the Denver skyline, a new email appeared. From Mason. Sent from his personal account. Subject: You were never replaceable. Rourke. It read, Elena, in Brightway's final days, I kept wondering what I could have done differently. I misjudged that your silence meant acceptance. But you didn't. You did what I couldn't, stood up for value. Thank you for not letting the world overlook you. Mason Rourke. I smiled and set the phone down. 10 years. 10 years of sleepless nights, mockery, and invisibility. But today, I don't need anyone to see me. I see myself. And because of that, my name, Elena Walsh, is no longer the forgotten one. It's a name with weight, with impact, with reach. Those who once couldn't see me no longer matter, because today I am the one who cannot be replaced.